Hello, everybody. Welcome to Bitcoin Not Crypto. Today we have a guest on, Paula from the Bitcoin Edge podcast. Can you tell me a little bit about what got you interested in Bitcoin to begin with?
Well, I was living in Zimbabwe in 2017. So I have always been aware of inflation. And I went to a talk on Bitcoin and they told me about inflation and how our money was being devalued. They also talked about Ethereum at the end and said that was the new Bitcoin and even better. But this was like a multi-level marketing type company, and the idea sounded good, but I had no idea what I was doing. So I did put money in, and it was because it was multi-level marketing. I didn't get it back. I they said it was a Bitcoin mining company, and then once I tried to get it back, it was impossible. So I lost, but that was the first introduction to Bitcoin. Then in 2020, like most people who had a lot of time on their hands, I started hearing about it again, had lots of time on my hands. So I started researching it. And now it started making sense again to me with the stimulus checks and all of that. At first, honestly, I thought these stimulus checks, great free money. I didn't even think about they printing the money because the difference between Zimbabwe and the US, well, Zimbabwe, of course, has inflation because they really mismanage their money. I didn't expect it to be as bad in the US. Well, and it's not as bad. We know it's not as bad, but it is happening here just at a slower rate. And that was the beginning of my journey.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Was the idea of Bitcoin over in Zimbabwe? Did it become a popular idea? Because I think what I see happening around the world is uh, people kind of get used to what is happening, and we have a slow bleed of inflation. Inflation's terrible, but it's just slow enough that not everybody's waking up at once. So I'm wondering, was there a sort of a wake up moment in Zimbabwe? Did you see anything around that where people needed an escape from their highly inflating currency? If you're struggling to figure out all this Bitcoin stuff and just want a one-on-one helping hand, I now do consults, which you can book through the link in my description. We can cover moving your Bitcoin off of an exchange into a hardware wallet, security best practices, and basically anything else that you want to go over. Just let me know what it is, and we'll figure out a time that works for you to book in a consult. If you're looking to get yourself some Bitcoin, you can use my link in the description as well for Bitcoin Well, and it is the best possible way, in my opinion, to buy Bitcoin. It's a non-custodial exchange, which means there's no counterparty risk. You send the money, they send you Bitcoin directly, and they also have non-KYC options available, and they have the lowest spreads and fees in the US and Canada. If you want to secure your passphrase for future generations or just in a way that is very safe and secure, I would recommend Stampseed. You can use my code BTC not crypto 15 and get 15% off. They have a titanium seed plate and a stamping kit that works really well, and it is a great product. Check them out as well with the link in the description.
Zimbabweans definitely need an escape. However, they also use the US dollar there. So most people go straight to the US dollar. And even today, that is what mostly happens. There are people in Zimbabwe who are teaching about Bitcoin. I think Me Premier Bitcoin course is there. So they are starting, but most people in Zimbabwe, the majority, live paycheck to paycheck and have very little extra to even save in Bitcoin. So that's the first goal there, is to get a little bit extra to save in Bitcoin. And yes, of course, the peer to peer and the money is needed as an alternative. But yeah, there's that little problem of not having extra income to save.
Yeah, it makes sense. I think that's the case around the world. Is a lot of nations look at the U.S. dollar as a. I mean, they literally call digital ones stable coins, right? There's the crypto version of U.S. dollars is stable coin, so they look at the U.S. dollar as stability. compare, and it is relatively compared to their own, although it still has its major problem, which is central control, money debasement, and all the other things that have turned us into Bitcoiners. I'm sure. Um, I have a tweet up here that I wanted to get to, Paula, that you made. It's a really simple quote here that you have, but I'd like to expand on it a little bit more. So it says, "Fiat fuels short-term thinking. Bitcoin fosters long-term vision." What did you kind of mean by this idea here?
So since I've gone down the rabbit hole and become less of a consumer before, and I see this a lot in my family, how we were almost taught to not keep money in the bank, because in the bank, especially in Zimbabwe, it was going to be eh, inflated away overnight. And I see that happening a lot, where spend the money in the bank because it's going to be worth less tomorrow. So I was a little bit like that. I was a little bit more of a saver than some of my other family members. But yeah, and I even owned gold before Bitcoin because I got that there was something wrong. But as I've learned more about Bitcoin, I realized that everything I spend money on could possibly better go into Bitcoin. I wrestle a little bit with, of course, living in the present and enjoying life, but on frivolous things like a new car or something that I don't actually need, then I do think more about whether it could be better put in Bitcoin. So the yeah, the Fiat tends to incentivize spending, and Bitcoin incentivizes saving, because over time, I believe that Bitcoin is going to be worth a lot more than anything, including a house that I put my Bitcoin in. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it's an interesting idea, and it's even an idea that, I mean, to me, it makes a lot of sense. But to economists, they think, well, we don't want to incentivize this idea of saving. We need people, like, a lot of economists will say, well, a little bit of inflation is good because it incentivizes people to spend money, which grows the economy. It creates consumerism. To me, that's an absolute joke. But I'd be curious to know what your thoughts are on that. Like, is the idea of having something like Bitcoin that is a money and can be a currency, something that has this max supply and a fixed issuance and it becomes deflationary, is that going to work for the economy?
That is definitely an area I'm no expert in. I have only learned about Austrian economics and even, Keynesian economics since I started studying Bitcoin. And I first read the Bitcoin Standard and many books since then, but I had no idea that there were these two different ideas of thought. And I've heard from many of my guests on my show that, yeah, central banks are not needed. And I don't know exactly how it would work, but it makes a lot of sense to me that Bitcoin can be divided infinitely, right? Almost. I'm not sure exactly how that works, but we could be on a Bitcoin standard. And I think one of the people that I listen to the most is Jeff Booth, and he often says that fiat and Bitcoin are incompatible. So one day we are headed that way, and to me, it's just a much better world because of what we already discussed. It incentivizes saving. It's I've also heard him say that inflation is the biggest lie we've been told, and that's just one of these things that I have to reprogram my mind about, because yeah, I thought 2% was fine, and now I'm beginning to learn that even 2% over 10 years or so is really taking away a lot of savings, and because our salaries don't go up the same amount, well, they might go up the same amount, but over time, I'm still gonna be losing, and yeah, I'm one of those people, I don't want to work forever. I always do something like this. I like being productive, but in a fiat job, not so much. So, and I realized that Bitcoin also gives me a lot more time. If I save in Bitcoin and I continue to hodl and keep my Bitcoin safe, then over time I will have more time. And yeah, that's really valuable on the fiat system and the central banking way, which enriches the people at the top the most. That's the whole problem. It enriches the people at the top. And I am very much a person who likes a fair world. So I'm not saying that everybody's going to be as productive and as smart as each other and make as much money. No, it's a free market, but at least with the Bitcoin system and standard, there is a better way to make it fair and open and honest for everybody.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. And I want to bring up this quote here too that you said is inspired by Jeff Booth, and I think it leads into a lot of what you've already said, but we can expand on it as well. As you say here, Bitcoin equals honest ledger bounded by energy. Fiat equals co-opted bounded by nothing. Bitcoin 21 million cap free market equals falling prices, so everything else would fall against it. Fiat infinite money printing, i.e., inflation, equals rising prices. Bitcoin equals truth, hope, abundance. Fiat inflation equals theft. You choose. I mean, there's a lot there we could go into, but I'm curious to hear kind of what comes to your mind when you when you rehear that tweet that you posted.
Yeah, it's kind of just a little bit about what I said, that on the Bitcoin standard we have a much fairer world. And I, with the money printing, I also didn't realize before Bitcoin how bad it was, and that by printing money is debasing everybody's savings who save in that money. And yeah, I didn't know that. I kind of trusted that, especially in the US, the government has your your best interest at heart, at least when it comes to money. We might not all agree on everything else, but I had no idea that the people closest to the money printer would become the wealthiest. And so it goes a little bit on that. It goes a little bit on that. I don't know a lot about how central banking works. I am reading The Creature from Jekyll Island at the moment. I actually have a little hard time with it. I'm not a real history buff. I don't enjoy it that much, but I want to know. I know it's a great book, and The Sovereign Individual. And I just think, like I said, I feel that everything I have learned, I need to unlearn and relearn this new system. And what Jeff Booth always says is that we've never seen a free market. I didn't know that. I thought we had a free market, but we've never seen a true free market. And Bitcoin is the first free market that has existed. So just with that, I would rather live in the Bitcoin way than in this market that's co-opted by people at the top and money printers and people who can take away our savings and energy. Because really, when you are saving your money, you're saving your time and energy. So, well, most of us Bitcoiners no longer save our time and energy in fiat, um, because Bitcoin, being only ever 21 million and probably quite a few lost at this point, it's a much better savings vehicle, and probably, and it will be a better money, and it is a better money for many people already. It's just that in the West, we tend to save because we do have that little bit of extra money that we can put into a savings.
Yeah, it's a couple things that come to mind here is it's interesting to me how complex the current financial system is and how much of it is actually hidden from us. So there's a lot of people that spend years studying it, economists, all this kind of different things. And then there's different types of, like you said, there's Keynesian, there's Austrian, right? So there's different ways of even interpreting like what could lead to, what could be a better way to observe or to change the way that the economy works and all this. But all of that, like, a lot of what the central bank does is hidden. We actually cannot see how much money is being printed. They literally don't know how many dollars there are because of, like, for example, like the euro dollar system that they have. So there's just an inability to really account for everything, and we have to trust numbers that come through different organizations that account for it, and they're outdated and all of this. And Bitcoin is really funny because when you talk to somebody that hasn't looked into Bitcoin, they think, oh well, I it's too complicated for me, I'm not into technology, I have no idea, I can't figure that thing out, it's like magical internet money, right? But it's like it's pretty I mean, you can understand some very basic things about Bitcoin, and you don't have to go that deep into it. And if you understood those things, like there's a fixed issuance, and that once all of the Bitcoin are mined, there's only a 21 million supply, and the Bitcoin network is like a monetary network where where you can send Bitcoin to different wallets, and that's a way to send value. And literally, if you just knew those things, you would know enough about Bitcoin to understand it. Whereas, like, what is a reverse repo? Why does the interest rates affect our money? Why is there money printing? Why is it the 2%? Why is technology deflationary, but we still have monetary inflation? Like, it's so much more complicated, and yet it's the system that everybody uses. It's just they don't understand it. It's really kind of funny.
It
I didn't
is.
really, yeah, yeah,
It is, and I think for most people, in order to get Bitcoin, you really have to see that there's a problem, right? That's always the first step because I've told so many of my family, my friends, and they still think that the current system is okay. It's not that bad and they're doing okay. And so I think the problem is one thing or something in your life that comes up and makes you realize that your time is valuable or you don't want to work on a treadmill forever. Is there another way? And even after that, you're right. I'm not very technical. I don't understand the exact what goes on but I understand the basics, and you only really have to understand the basics. I do understand that it solves the double spend problem. I understand that there will never be more than 21 million coins, like you said, and we don't know how many the central bank is issuing. I mean, the debt in the US and all around the world, right? Because everyone says that the US is the best shirt in the dirty laundry.
yeah.
And so that means everybody else is printing lots of money too. But we don't even have to understand all of that. I just think some people, myself and probably you included, once you start to see all these lies that we've been told and that there is a better way, I just can't get enough. I wanna learn more and more.
It's definitely a rabbit hole.
Mhm.
That's what I found as soon as I started getting interested in this subject. I from like years and years before I even owned any, I understood the concept of digital gold, but Bitcoin being digital gold, but it's that's only one way to define it, and it's incredibly inaccurate. It's really just there's certain principles about it that resemble how gold is as well, but it's a digital type of formation of it. Um, but Yeah, so one thing leads to another with Bitcoin, and it's just like, I was talking to somebody at my climbing gym I go to, and he was asking me what I did, and I told him, Bitcoin podcast, and oh, that's so interesting. I would never own any of it, but he started asking me all these questions, and I could tell he was interested, and I was like, even if you didn't buy any, it's intellectually incredibly interesting. Like it's just for an intellectual type person, it's just a fascinating subject, and that's what led me down to want to learn more about it. Is just it's kind of mind blowing. Each thing you realize the significance of the difficulty adjustment with mining, and you're like, whoa, that doesn't exist with any other commodity. It doesn't it doesn't have that perfect balance where when there's more energy being used to create or to extract Bitcoin or a commodity, the difficulty adjustment adjusts for that. So it's just like, whoa, that's such a cool system that we've never seen anywhere else, and it's incredibly valuable to have something like that with something like money. So yeah, it's just intellectually, it's just a very interesting subject, that's for sure.
Yeah, I was in the gym the other day and I said, "Yeah, I'm spending more of my time in Bitcoin." And this is someone who's known me for a long time. They almost did a head jerk, like, "Bitcoin?" And I was speaking to somebody today and she said, "Oh, but I listened to this podcast and they mentioned what the government's doing with it is not good." And I said "Oh, well, did they talk about Bitcoin or crypto?" "Oh, well, they didn't distinguish." I said, "Yeah, there's so much misinformation out there." And yeah, I've heard we're still early, but it it doesn't seem like we're early when, you know, I know we're early in time frame, but we're close to 100,000. And yeah, I don't like to focus on price, but at the moment we measure in US dollars. And yeah, most people aren't even interested.
Yeah, no, you're right, and I think it is our nominal bias, and we see the history of Bitcoin, and we think, oh, we're not early because we didn't buy it at 10 cents or $10. It's close to 100,000, and that's a lot of money. 100,000. That's a lot of money, but um, compared to what, right? Like, personally, I think there is. I don't know how high Bitcoin could go, but I know that it's going way higher because of what it is and how valuable something like it is to the world that hasn't woken up to it yet. They don't understand it. They don't see the need for it. But I think every day more people recognize the need for it, and they realize where it's succeeded, where maybe gold has not in the past, but that it fills maybe another like a similar need to that, and more and more people realize the problems with monetary debasement, and before they would go to something like gold, and now we have something that doesn't have the transportability through time or through space problem that gold has, and it doesn't have the divisibility problems that gold has, and it solves those issues very well, and it does it with no centralization, and yeah, it's an amazing thing, really, for sure.
Is Are Canadians more interested in it because of what's happening in Canada?
I'm not sure. I think statistically, uh, Canadians actually aren't huge adopters of Bitcoin, although that seems surprising to me because I've met a lot of people here that are Bitcoiners. I just held a local meetup in a small town here. We had a nice show up of 7 people for our first monthly meetup, and there's more businesses accepting Bitcoin in Vancouver, which is my closest big city, than any other city in North America. And I I don't know. I think that like the Canadian dollar, we've seen it deteriorate against the American dollar, well, my entire life. I've seen that. I've seen it not perform well. I've seen my my housing is just horrific up here in Canada. It's horrible. It's a horrible situation for housing. Every single one of my friends, we're I'm 30, so all my friends probably should have houses by now at this age, right? And none of them do because they can't afford them. I have a friend who has worked a really good job in the oil industry, and he saved up a ton of money, and he could get a down payment for something that would basically be a tear down in a decent location, and he just said, "No, I'm not willing to do that." He just bought, $100,000 truck instead. And that's kind of the mentality, right? It's like, well, I'm never going to get this house. I'm never going to get a decent house. I might as well just spend this money on something that I can enjoy right now. And it's a sad reality. And so with that reality of the situation here in Canada, I think it should lead to, and statistically, yeah, it might be the numbers might not be accurate or something, because I feel like Canadians need Bitcoin more than a lot of people. I think, yeah. I wanted to get to this tweet here as well, Paula, that you have. Everyone in my immediate family owns some Bitcoin. I bought it for them. I was curious to know what your strategy for that was. Did you actually buy people in your family Bitcoin? Did you hold it for them, or did you send it to them? And how has that been going for you?
Yeah, you're gonna catch me on this one. I did buy it for them. I haven't sent it to them yet. My brother would probably try to cash it out and spend it on something he needs. But I did. So I just feel so strongly about it. My mom, who is now 80, called yesterday and said, "Oh, I see Bitcoin's up, Bitcoin's down. Are you going to sell some?" That's always the question. And I said, "Well, no, I'm not selling Bitcoin. I don't have any lifestyle chips that I need to cash out for. I might sell some other related things because my goal in life is to get out of my fiat job and spend more time in the Bitcoin space. I found now that I'm not enjoying my fiat job as much. So that's my goal for this year. But the stock market's not doing as planned. But with family, I with my one brother, he owed me money and he sent extra. And I quickly put that in Bitcoin. And I told him, I said, I'm going to put it in Bitcoin and he's okay. But I think the best thing would be to send it to a wallet for him. But then I think, well, then it's not on cold storage and we've got that issue. So that's with him. My niece, she had a gold coin, probably a maple leaf, and I had it in the US, by mistake. It was given to me by my mom, and it was belonged to my niece. So I said to my niece, "I will buy Bitcoin for you." I said, "And if Bitcoin goes down," it was around 30,000. I said, "I'll give you the value of the gold coin, whatever it is. But if it goes up, then you might be happy." And I also sent her some videos, which she mostly ignored on Bitcoin. But yeah, so I bought for both of them. I educated my other brother too. He bought his own. Now he's going more towards the ETFs, no matter what I say. People still trust the US and they don't. And no matter what I say about self sovereignty and the importance of that, and I did say that, I said, maybe one day the ETFs will allow you to get your coins out, but at the moment you can't. And the importance of self sovereignty also coming from a country like Zimbabwe, you can take your Bitcoin anywhere in the world, as you and I know, and you just have to remember your seed phrase, or you can take it on a cold card and you can go anywhere. But yes, of course, in the US, that's usually not an issue, and not everybody has the same level of security. So I am still educating my family. And then I also bought my mom some. She will never touch it. But if anything happened to me, it could help with her retirement. So, and just not big amounts, but in time, Bitcoin grows.
Yeah, so Bitcoin at trading that swapping that gold coin over to Bitcoin for your niece. I mean, what a trade at 30. You said Bitcoin was at 30,000?
Yeah.
Yeah, wow. So has she taken any interest in it now that, like number go up is one reason that a lot of people take interest in it, right? Has that sparked some interest? Now it went past 100, it's, retracing down. Like that's 3x, right? At least since then.
Yeah, and I try to be cool when I went for Christmas to South Africa. I said, your Bitcoin has gone up. Oh, wow, it's gone up 3 times. I said, "You want it?" "No, no, I don't need it yet." So I am trying to educate her that it's a good savings technology, but I also don't want to be the person who controls what she does.
Sure. Yeah, of course. That makes sense. Yeah. So you mentioned there, you mentioned the ETFs and how they're, I mean, the way I look at ETFs is their price exposure to Bitcoin. Yeah, the ETFs buy spot underneath, and that might affect the market or whatever. But it isn't. You're taking, in my opinion, you're taking on additional risk because somebody's still custodying that Bitcoin. So you might as well eliminate that risk and take custody yourself, and that's the only vulnerability there. Um, and of course, you have to learn how to do that. But I'd be curious to know a little bit more about why you think it's important to differentiate the ETFs to actual cold storage, held Bitcoin. Why is it important to own your own Bitcoin?
So owning your own Bitcoin, as I mentioned, is being self-sovereign. It means that I have the money in my possession. It's not in the ETF where, like you mentioned, somebody else's self is custodying the Bitcoin. And I, again, am no expert on this. And I really want to get better myself at the self custody. And I do see this as a little bit of a drawback to people getting into Bitcoin. And I think as time goes on, it's going to get easier and easier. But it's not that it's hard, it just takes time. And I also work a full-time job. And so learning, I run a node, and getting my wallet set up on that just takes time. And I don't expect everybody's going to do that. And I know you guys are, quite a lot further than that. And there's so many different ways. But I think people have to get i- secure enough with their self custody before they obviously move that way. So the ETFs are a first step. But the reason that I really, so there's two things for me. I Having the ETF, you do feel that it's safer because you don't have to trust yourself to keep it safe. And then the second thing is what Jeff Booth says is that eventually we are going to go to a full Bitcoin standard, and that might be a long time. He doesn't specify when that's going to happen, but he just seems to know this stuff better than most. And having a Bitcoin in the ETF is almost like being on the fiat rails. It's Even though they have Bitcoin, you personally really are using fiat to get the price appreciation. So I want to be on the Bitcoin network because that's the world I want to see.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's well put, and it is. I mean, there's there's layers to that fiat system with an ETF. You're buying it through a broker. The broker's holding it for you. You're buying it from an asset, an ETF issuer. They're not even the custodian of that Bitcoin. It's Coinbase or whatever. And so there's just so many layers from you to that actual Bitcoin. And then even when you sell that ETF, they have the option, like iBit has the option to cash settle. So they don't actually necessarily need to ever sell that Bitcoin if they wanted to just hold it themselves and rebalance internally. So
Hmm.
you're not even participating on the Bitcoin network with miners and, all of this. So it's pretty far removed, and it is a fiat way of participating in Bitcoin. I think the ETFs have been huge for Bitcoin and potentially Bitcoin adoption, even because I do think that people care about um, what they own, and when they when they allocate to Bitcoin ETF, and they see that if they bought it when it came out, or whenever they bought it, if it's appreciated a bunch, it's become a larger portion of their net worth, they've probably care a little bit more about it. They might, when they see an article come up about Bitcoin, they might read it, as opposed to if they had nothing invested, they would not even care, right? So I see it that way as a positive, but it's also just this huge stack of Bitcoin that has become financialized in the fiat system. So it's an interesting situation there for sure with the ETF.
Have you seen quite a few people lately, like Plan B and Richard Byworth, who is somebody I interviewed? And it's funny because he interviewed Jeff Booth at the end of the year. They both announced that they were moving to the ETFs. And I wonder if that's for security reasons, so that people don't think they have it, or they really just are. I don't know. But there's quite a
Maybe.
few people who do go with the ETFs. And yeah.
Yeah, I have seen that. I saw that with it's, maybe somebody might just say that so that they, no risk of a $5 rent attack or anything like that, right? Like, who knows if they're actually doing that? And if they are doing that, who knows what their reasoning for it is? Maybe it is the idea that they're a public facing figure of some kind, or that might protect them that way. I think even like you know, a multi-sig with what is it called? Where you're dealing with another institution as part of that multi-sig, and you could have a dummy wallet. There's other ways to secure your Bitcoin. I think that would be better than buying the ETF even. Um, the other thing, though, too, is there's the additional financialization of Bitcoin as an ETF. So if you had it in a margin account, you could loan against it right away.
Hmm.
If you wanted to get some sort of yield from it, you could sell covered calls on the ETF, where you can't do that against Bitcoin. Or if you thought, if you believe in the 4-year cycle and you think, okay, I'm going to try to time this thing, but I don't want to sell my Bitcoin or Bitcoin ETF, I could buy some puts against it, right? And then if that downside comes, then you sell those puts at a profit. So I don't know. Those would be my arguments for it, right? Again, I think the usefulness of Bitcoin in cold storage is what I want, right? I want to be able to run my own node. I want to be able to verify my own money. I want to be able to take it with me. I don't want anybody to be able to actually take it from me um, without me voluntarily at some point giving it to them, right? That's the power you have with something you truly own. So there's benefits to both, but I would say the benefits to and I preach this all the time, the benefits to cold storage Bitcoin and definitely outweighs the custodial Bitcoin IOUs that are the ETFs.
Yeah. That's a
Yeah.
good way to put it.
I have another tweet here from you. We're going through all of them here, Paula. This one here is, a little bit of advertising for this house that might still be for sale. This is a listing that you have. So you must be a realtor in Florida. This is what I'm assuming. Can you tell me a little bit about the real estate market, maybe, and your experience in it, and how that relates to Bitcoin, if at all?
Yeah, I'll tell you my real estate story. So I was in fitness most of my life, health and fitness, and I loved it, but I wasn't getting where I wanted to be towards retirement. So I decided to go into real estate, and that was my plan: buy properties and rent them out, because that's what many people do to gain wealth and for retirement. So I started doing that, and it is going well. The market in Florida is interesting right now, and I'll go back to where I was starting to buy properties. And so I had a property And in Florida right now, we have a problem with condominiums. There was a Surfside building that fell down. It killed over 100 people. And so the state of Florida made a law that all condos and apartments have to get up to code. And in order to do that, takes a lot of money, a lot of money. And most of them have not got up to code. But the building I had bought was not up to code. The the fees were gonna more than double plus assessments. So I said it doesn't warrant the fees, even though mine was paid off. So I said, but right then I had been learning about Bitcoin, and just that investment property had already doubled in value since COVID. I bought it at the beginning of 2020 and it doubled in value. So that's how much real estate was going up. But at the same time, Bitcoin would have gone up more. And I now was aware of these figures. And I'm getting to the point in my life where I don't want the hassle of dealing with renters. I don't want the hassle of managing a property. It's not my favorite thing to do. I do enjoy selling houses, but I realized I don't love managing. And so I decided to sell. I put most of that in Bitcoin. And I did put some of that in the ETFs, by the way, because I knew I couldn't sell the Bitcoin, but I wanted to sell that to buy another property. Now I'm wondering whether that's the best move. It might just be better to live in a Bitcoin um, or just keep, you know, it definitely will not be an investment property. I am not going that way again, even for diversification. I only see Bitcoin going forward as an investment and related type. So that's what happened with my real estate. Also, as I've been doing it, I'm only in my 8th year, so I started kind of late. I find that I prefer talking about Bitcoin. I prefer everything to do with Bitcoin. And, I've said before that if your passion is real estate or if your passion is photography or whatever fiat job you have, wonderful, go for it. But for me, it's no longer my passion. So I am working towards getting more into the Bitcoin space. And for now, I will put my profits into Bitcoin and eventually I'll move into Bitcoin because I realize my time is the most valuable resource I have. And to spend my time doing things I don't enjoy does not make sense anymore, especially when I see people who you know, I had a friend who died young and in a car accident, and I realized it can be over. So don't spend your time doing what you don't enjoy because nobody knows when it's over. Might live a nice long life. And I don't focus on the bad. I focus on very positive. I I definitely believe in the power of mindset and positive thinking, not just positive thinking, but I believe in the power of the mind. And so I don't focus on the negative, but I also realize that time is valuable and where I spend my time matters more now. It's not just about making money anymore.
That's a really interesting story. You mentioned there that you're not interested in the rental properties anymore, and I find it very interesting because people do just call those investment properties, right? But to me, it's when you buy a rental property or when you have a rental property, it's a business. I wouldn't classify it as an investment. An investment would be something where other people are working for you. And well, I guess there's maybe degrees of how passive an investment is. So I guess somebody could define it as a type of investment. But when I look at the trade-offs of running what I would consider a real estate rental business, management, maintenance, unexpected expenses. So just to get your story correct, there, when you bought that condo, there was all the code needed to be updated. So there was a huge was there so there would have been a huge added expense that was unexpected, basically, is what you were saying, which is like crazy. I mean, that's
Yeah.
so brutal, right? Um, Whereas with Bitcoin, I mean, you might have unexpected news come out, but fundamentally nothing changes with Bitcoin when these big news stories happen. Bitcoin just, TikTok next block, right? As people say. Whereas with that condo you had, fundamentally something changed because of regulation. Like, it was no longer basically like it was like mandatory to update. So there's a lot of uncertainty with that, and even with, I mean, Florida has hurricanes, so there's, the hurricane season can be different, and you have to, the insurance is going to adjust depending on how severe or how under allocated the insurers were for previous years. And to me, there just seems to be so much uncertainty in real estate, and then on top of that, it's much more illiquid. So if you saw all this uncertainty, you said, I want out, you still got to, list the property, maybe fix it up to a point, or get it ready to, stage and all this stuff, and then you got to wait for the right buyer. Whereas with Bitcoin, if you really just need it out for whatever reason, if you needed to swap into some fiat because an emergency came up and you need fiat to spend on that emergency, you could go on an exchange, send your Bitcoin, boom, fiat immediately. I mean, it's just, the trade-offs seem wild to me when people evaluate real estate versus Bitcoin.
Well, you sold me, but I can't sell too many other people.
Do
I
you?
even
Yeah,
even my broker, he says, "Yeah, but I like to see it." And I get that some people like managing. I don't. I see all the benefits that you mentioned. And besides that, y if you price property in Bitcoin, it's falling forever, right? The property that I bought was around 21 Bitcoin in 2020, and by the time I sold it, it was around 8, and that's gonna keep going down, right?
and it
Whatever your
and it
level
doubled
is.
in it doubled in fiat price, you said, yeah.
Right, and doubled in fiat price, yeah.
Wow.
So
Do you think that people will wake up to this realization that maybe they don't have to work as hard on their investments, that maybe Bitcoin could just be a savings mechanism for them?
I think some people will. Some people. There are a lot of people in the States that are doing very well, and they don't have a need for it. And I always say, even Michael Saylor, he had a need for it. His company had a need for it, and that's why he went down the rabbit hole. So I think when people realize there's a need, they start looking into it. And yeah, it's but I do the ones people that I think need it are not ready. And that's sort of why I started my podcast, so that the people who are ready, there's information for them to hear regular people talk about it and some famous people. But yeah, I don't know what gets people to Bitcoin except pain, a need, and maybe education.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been a grassroots effort this whole time, and we can maybe see some evidence of that changing with some top-down adoption. I mean, even today, or I guess it was yesterday, the strategic Bitcoin reserve written into the executive order. So, we can see it changing there, who's going to be allocated to this asset. But um, I kind of think that, yeah, the people that benefited from the most are the people with the least. And those are the people that it's very difficult for them to even, get onto Bitcoin. But they would benefit the most from it. You haven't had any offers put in by anybody with for using Bitcoin on any houses yet?
No, when I listed my place, there was only the option to put cryptocurrency. So I put cryptocurrency. I hardly ever see anybody put that. I know some houses have been bought and sold in Bitcoin and probably other cryptocurrencies, but I haven't I haven't had any.
Maybe one day soon, I imagine. Yeah, just I have one more tweet we'll go over here, Paula, and then if there's anything else that you wanted to talk about, we could talk about that as well. But I thought this one was great. You said here, I've heard people say that Bitcoin is an IQ test, but an ego, or not an IQ test, sorry, but an ego test. I think it's a bit of both. What do you think? What did you come out with this? So which one do you lean on more, or what do you think it is? An IQ test or an ego test?
I think it is a bit of both. I've asked many people on my show, and most people say it's more of an ego test. And I see that. I see that because in order for me to get Bitcoin, I have to drop my ego that I was wrong about the current system. And the guy that I had on who he calls himself AA, and he actually has Airbnbs, and he said it's a lot of work, and his goal is to be all Bitcoin. But people in Bitcoin obviously see the difference between when you have real estate and Bitcoin, and unless you love it, yeah, then Bitcoin is wins over real estate, in my opinion. But except for the passive income side, which is why people keep it. But back to that tweet, the ego. Yeah, he was saying that why doesn't Elon Musk adopt Bitcoin? And he says that's an ego thing. And I also think with him, it's a need thing. When you when you're the richest man in the world, or even very wealthy, no matter what happens, for many people like that, they're going to be fine. Doesn't matter if the money gets debased, but it's more people l- like like you mentioned, probably the people who need it and people right in the middle who, with a little bit of extra Bitcoin, can make a big change in their life and not work for the rest of their life with the right savings in Bitcoin. And whereas for those people with that much money, it's not gonna, yes, they'll be wealthier, but it won't change their lifestyle. So back to ego, IQ. I say IQ because, like I said, I knew nothing about Keynesian economics, Austrian economics. It's not that it's hard, but it does take a little bit of study. It does take, and having a 5-minute conversation with people is not enough. I look for the perfect orange pulling 5-minute conversation. You have to start with the history of money and go into the what is money and then inflation, and then so get to the problem. I suppose the best way to orange pill people is meet people where they are, and that takes a skill. That I can't always tell where they are. So yeah, I think it's a little bit of willingness to then study. So a little bit of an IQ, because nobody I know does self custody. So it's not because they're not smart, it's because they just haven't studied. So, yeah, so maybe it's more of an ego, but a little bit of IQ is needed.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, yeah. There is some IQ needed and just some willingness to learn. I think people with I think like if you were literally looking at people's IQ, I think any degree of IQ could understand enough to say, "Oh yeah, I want some of this." Um, but yeah, I know some people. I think maybe it's personally. I think maybe it trends a little more to the ego test. I know personally someone who says, "Oh, I don't own Bitcoin because I tried to buy it when there was the flash crash during COVID, and Coinbase wouldn't let me connect my bank account, and when I tried to buy it, when I finally got it figured out, it had already gone up twice as much." And that's an ego, right? That's saying, "Oh, I deserve to have it lower." Another person that says that I know they're very smart. I've had a conversation with them. They understand Bitcoin. They say, "Well, why are so many Republicans interested in Bitcoin, right?" And for them, it's like ego is a part of how you identify, right? So they identify with a different party, and so When they see this other party they don't like identifying with it, they say, "Oh, no, that's not good because also think whatever else they think is not good," right? So, an ego thing there as well when really it's not about any of that, right? So yeah, I think it lends itself a little more to the ego test, if I had to answer that.
That's
Um,
that's funny because as I was speaking, I'm saying, yeah, it's more of an ego test, and ego is such a big thing with humans, right? It just I notice how people don't want to be wrong, myself included. It's a human thing. I've got better as I've got older, but people don't want to be wrong, and being right is very important. So yeah, I can see. I think it's more of an ego, but just a little bit of yeah, IQ, but more like you said, learning needed.
yeah, no, totally. Well, I think this has been a great conversation. You're happy to add anything else that we haven't talked about here at the end, Paula, and also where people can find you and your wonderful podcast as well.
Yeah, well, so I am on X. I only really started on X because of my podcast and because I wanted to talk about Bitcoin and meet Bitcoiners, and I've met really wonderful people. I am also on Noster, and I see that doing well going forward. But I find a lot of my guests on X, and sometimes people on Noster are more into privacy. So that's why I stay on X. And yeah, and then I do my YouTube channel, The Bitcoin Edge, because I wanted to talk to people about Bitcoin. And I wanted it to be for regular people and for anybody who wants to talk. And I found Bitcoin is amazing. I mean, I've just asked people like James Lavish, Jeff Booth, Mark Yusko. And yeah, he's not all Bitcoin, but we discuss Bitcoin. So that's how I do it. And yeah, I don't like one other thing is I don't like to be a toxic maxi. I think people are going to come the way they want to come, and I want to not not shout at the world, but be more of a source of information, and people will find it when they're ready because nobody makes any changes because of coercion. It's more because they they come because they're ready.
Great points. Yeah, and all your links will be in the description as well for anybody that wants to find them. Yeah, thanks so much for being on the podcast today, Paula.
Thank you. It was a lot of fun.